Hello, it's me again, Mike Newberry, the pastor at the First Baptist Church in Lincoln, Arkansas. And I am very pleased to be able to sit here before you once again. And so hopefully you can go back into your memory and remember where we are now. Well, we have completed our study of the 6th chapter of Galatians. And we've moved on now to a study of the 12th chapter of Acts. And I shared with you last time that the title of all these messages are going to be Herod versus God. And in the first message, we talked about how that this chapter is a snapshot of what many of our life moments look like, or many, not just moments, but seasons. And how important it is that we are able to come to chapters like this so that we do not get caught up in the way something looks at the beginning. My friends, you need to contrast the beginning of Acts chapter 12 with the ending of Acts chapter 12. You need to contrast the two. Why? Because we're going to say over and over and over again that nothing and nobody can succeed in challenging God. And so in the first message, I gave you a list of beings and people who have attempted to challenge God. The first one being Lucifer himself. And we talked about Pharaoh. Saying, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" And how God came and introduced himself to Pharaoh. And how Pharaoh learned, as all must learn, that we must bow to the sovereignty and lordship of God and Jesus Christ. And we talked about Goliath and how he too stepped out into the valley and defied God and defied God's people. And how God used a little shepherd boy named David with a sling and a stone. And Goliath got his head cut off. And all of those stories are in God's book for us, for our learning, so that we can find hope and confidence in the Scriptures. And this story in Acts chapter 12 is here for that reason as well. And so to kind of help you get caught up, we know that Herod has turned his attention towards the church. And it said at the beginning that he wants to vex the church, torment the church. And his first step was killing James. And he saw how that pleased the Jews. And he then went another step and captured Peter and arrested Peter with the intent of having Peter killed. And so we're now in the middle of this story. And so I'm going to begin reading at verse 6 and read through verse 17 of our story of Acts chapter 12. "And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. And the keepers before the door kept the prison. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, 'Arise up quickly.' And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said to him, 'Gird thyself and bind on thy sandals.' And so he did. And he said to him, 'Cast thy garment about thee and follow me.' And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought he saw a vision. When they were past the first and second ward, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened to them of its own accord, and they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. And when Peter was come to himself, he said, 'Now I know of a surety that the Lord has sent his angel and has delivered me out of the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews.' And when he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. And as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken named Rhoda. And when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness, but ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. And they said to her, "Thou art mad." But she constantly confirmed that it was even so. Then they said, "It is his angel." But Peter continued knocking. And when they had opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. But he, beckoning unto them with the hand to hold their peace, declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. And he said, "Go show these things to James and to the brethren." And he departed and went into another place. Well, is it true that even believers in Jesus experience dark times? And we know the answer is yes. I mean, even if I tried to say not, you and I know I'd be lying. Why? Because we've all lived long enough that we've experienced many of a dark period. James chapter 1 and verse 2 says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations." And we notice that I emphasize that word when. It is not if, but it is when. My friends, you and I, as long as we wake up and we're still this side of heaven, then you and I need to understand, where is it that I live? My friends, we're living in a place that is contrary to us, that is against us. And one thing you and I ought to eventually expect is that this world cursed by sin is going to make itself known for what it is. So like James says, when you fall into these various trials, and we're glad that James says when that happens, you can experience joy because you know that it's not an empty experience, but God is going to use it to your benefit. We all know that our God can take and make all things good for us. Romans 8:28 is one of God's great promises. But we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And we notice how that verse starts. This is something we know. This is something we know. But it's also something that you need to be constantly refreshing yourself with. It's something we know, but it's something we have to keep making ourselves aware of. We all experience trials, sickness, fear, disappointments of different kinds. We all have our dark days. Here's our question. Just because our circumstances are dark, does that mean that we have no light? Acts chapter 12 reveals that the gospel light pierces the night and lights our way. Anytime hell challenges the church or challenges a Christian, God rises to meet the challenge. We've entitled our messages, Herod versus God. If you've been saved for any length of time, you know what it feels like to have something or someone rise up and challenge you. Herod can be replaced by whatever it is that in this moment is in your life and is tormenting you, is frustrating you. For someone, it's financial. For someone, it's marital problems. For someone, it's problems at work. For someone, it's depression. For someone, it's family discord. For someone, it's car trouble. And I could go on and on and on. So what Herod is in your world today? What Herod is it that has risen up against you and is trying to stir you up emotionally. I want to take you to Psalm 37 real fast and point out something I found. This isn't in my notes. I just thought of it. And I want you to notice what I want to call the steps that need to be taken so that you and I can return to peace. And so in Psalm 37, it starts out with the word fret. It says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity." I learned that the word fret here means to burn up with emotion. So the word fret means something has happened. Like we're talking here today, something has risen in your life and is challenging you and your faith. And you are now burning inside with emotion. And you desperately need to find your way back to peace again. And we're going to find the steps back to peace in these verses. So again, Psalm 37, verse 2. "For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who brings wicked devices to pass. And cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil." My friends, that is one of so many different passages in the Bible that give us a step-by-step process of how you and I do not have to exist in a season where we are burning up with negative emotions. But we can take these steps and bring ourselves back to a place of rest. And it is a process that somebody listening to me that you desperately need to follow. So again, we've entitled all of our messages, Herod versus God. And you and I need to learn the final outcome of every one of these challenges. How many of you believe it is impossible to please God without faith? Now, we believe that. Why? Because it's right out of the Bible. Well, think about this with me about that. Faith, by its very nature, requires that challenges exist. Paul said about hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man sees, why does he yet hope for? And I think the same thing is true about faith. And so I see it like this. You and I find it much easier to believe if there is a little bit of evidence in our midst. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're facing a financial challenge, and that's your Herod. And it would be much easier to believe if you had a little money in the bank. But here is something I have said to saints through the years. When does faith become especially hard? When it's pure. What do I mean by that? It is the complete and total absence of any such evidence. There's nothing concrete upon which you can climb up on and stand and will give you that extra boost in helping you believe. And my friends, there are such moments that happen in our lives. There will come a moment that such a trial and such a tribulation and such a storm will arise that is so severe that it will take away every semblance of evidence. of every spot of concrete proof. And we know that is the definition of pure faith. It says that faith is the substance of something that we hope for. It is the evidence of something that we don't see. And so you and I need to understand that these kind of moments are going to come, and we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised if we wake up and we walk into a season of storms. We walk into a season of trials and tribulations. We're going to have these kinds of moments as long as we're living this side of heaven. And so that is why this chapter becomes important. Because again, if we're not careful, we're going to get consumed in how our storms appear in their beginning. What do we need to see? Friends, you need to see the moment that God shows up. When God shows up and he delivers you. Because he will show up. It's just a matter of time. And so, to me, sometimes it's getting your mind to think a certain way. One of the pieces of armor that we have is the helmet of salvation. And what does the helmet do? The helmet is the piece of armor that talks about how is your mind operating? How does your mind think? My friends, here's just a good thought. I mean, there's somebody I'm talking to right now that you're right in the middle of a stormy season. You're right in the middle of your troubles. And you need to rebuke your mind and rein in your emotions. And you need to train your mind to think a certain way that will allow you to be able to endure. And here's the way you need to train your mind to think. You need to keep telling yourself that trials, tribulations, they did not come to stay, but they came to pass. That there's a time limit on them. And that's the only thing at play here is time. And how much time do I have to let go by before God is going to step into my world and put a stop to everything and bring me back to a place of blessing. Bring me back to the mountaintop. That we will eventually cross the valley and we will be back on the mountaintop again. It's just a matter of time. And it's this thought that when you go to bed, that you need to have this thought. I have endured another day of this trial. And it is not one day more. It is one day less. And you're that much closer to God's deliverance. And if you can train your mind to think that way, then, my friends, you will find your faith giving you the ability to endure. So we're looking now at our second message. And we're getting actually now into this mighty display of the power of God on Peter's behalf. So we're going to look at Peter's miraculous deliverance. How many of you are waiting on your miraculous deliverance? How many am I talking to right now that you're in this period of waiting? I mean, here's a question I've asked the church. Does God have a waiting room? And we know he does. And there's somebody who's in it right now. And how many am I talking to that you're waiting on your miracle? I think the Bible throughout teaches us something. And it is this. It is not a matter of power. It is a matter of time. Satan will never have more power than God. God will always be all powerful. And we took note of verse 6 last time. There was a period of time that the chains, bars, gates, and soldiers restricted Peter. But what happened when God's timing arrived? When God's perfect moment arrived? What happened to all those chains? What happened to all those bars? And what happened to all those gates? The Bible teaches us that we need to see by faith and not by sight. I know I live in a physical body, and when I open my eyes, I'm going to see what it is that's in front of me. As long as what I see in front of me is not what God has promised me, then you and I need to see the substance of what we're hoping for, the evidence of what we can't yet see. Peter is going to teach us what to do as long as what you see in front of you is still the challenge. I know what I'm believing God for. And in every one of our seasons of challenge and trials and tribulations, it is different for each one of us, but yet the general fact is still the same. I know what I'm believing God for. I know what I believe God has promised me. But when I look through my physical eyes, all I see is the obstacle. All I see is the challenge. And Peter is going to teach you what to do as long as what you see is still the challenge. And if we'll learn from Peter, then you and I are going to be able to successfully endure the season. And we're going to eventually arrive at our miraculous deliverance. And this is so important. And Romans chapter 5 is another place where I think you and I need to go, and we need to learn the ways of God. And we need to learn how it is that you and I eventually arrive at a place where our faith is rock solid. And it can't be shook. It can't be rattled. Our confidence in God is so sure that you and I, even if we're in the middle of the darkest of periods, our faith is strong. And we're going to learn here in Romans 5 that there's a process that you and I have to go through. There are things we're going to have to be able to endure in order to arrive at that rock solid place. So listen to Romans 5, beginning at verse 3. And not only so, but we glory in tribulation, knowing that tribulation produces patience or endurance. And patience or endurance produces experience. And experience produces hope. And hope is the kind that is not ever ashamed. And that idea of a hope that's not ashamed is a hope that is solid. It's a hope that can't be rattled. It's a hope that can't be shook. And that's where we want to get to. But what's the process? The process is that you have to enter into tribulation and understand that God's reason for tribulation is not just to torment you, not just to hurt you. My friends, when you look up into heaven, God forbid you see that God is some kind of ogre up there, that he just likes to thump us. That's not God. God has a reason for allowing the trials and tribulations to come into our life, that he wants to better you, and he wants to strengthen you. He wants to teach you. He wants to train you. And you and I have to begin to cooperate with him. And so we're going to learn how to glory in tribulation, because tribulation is what produces the ability to endure. And if I can learn how to endure, if I can learn how to enter a season, walk through that entire season, and then let God walk me out of that season, then I'm going to eventually gain some Christian experience. And once I've gained enough Christian experience, I'm then going to arrive at hope. A hope that can't be shamed, can't be shook. And so Peter's going to show us, again, what it looks like. If you and I are still in the middle of it, and we're waiting on our miracle. And so I brought this out last time, but I think the first thing that you and I have to do is we have to stand on God's promises. And I said to you last time that God has filled his Bible with many precious promises. I mean, have you learned this yet? Have you learned that you and I do not live on explanations? Oh, believer, we live on promises. And God has filled his Bible with many promises. And I believe this about God's Bible. I believe that this Bible, somewhere in these pages, will speak specifically to anything that this world is ever going to do to you. You will find a word from God that will speak directly into the moment that you find yourself in. And what's the key? The key is that you and I have to keep turning the page. We have to keep reading the words on the page if we're going to eventually arrive at the promises, if we're going to find the promises. And so Peter was able to do that. And he was able to stand on a promise that was spoken directly to him from the very lips of Jesus Christ himself. In John chapter 21, verses 18 and 19. And I brought this out last time. And I reminded you of after Jesus was raised from the dead, that him and Peter took a walk. And Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And I just want to think that he said that 3 times, and Peter 3 times responded, "Yes, Lord, I love you." And every "I love you" erased the previous 3 when he said, "I don't know him." And so Jesus was restoring Peter back to his place of faithfulness. And then Jesus spoke directly into Peter and told him literally how his life would end. And he told him specifically that when you were young, you just went where you wanted to go. But when you get old, somebody's going to take you to places that you don't want to go. And the Bible says specifically that Jesus spoke concerning how Peter would die. And so why did Peter know that Herod could not and would not kill him? How did he know? I believe he stood on that promise. And he reminded himself of that promise. And he said to himself that there is no way that Herod is going to be able to take my life, because this is what Jesus said to me. And you need to be able to say the same thing. You need to be able to say whatever it is the trial is, you need to be able to say, I just read it on this page in the Bible, and this is what God spoke. And greater is he that is in me than he that's in the world. So you need to find a promise. And you need to climb up on that promise and stand on it and pray it and memorize it and quote it and speak it to yourself over and over and over again, because God will always keep his promises. And then he rested. Does this mean to rest in the promise, to rest in the promiser? Does it mean that we never feel the emotions of stress or worry or fear? And no, I'm not denying our human existence. I mean, to me, it is human nature that when something happens, we're going to feel fear. When something happens, we're going to feel stress. We're going to feel worry. But how many of us understand that even though I might have that immediate reaction, How many of us know that you and I ought to know that I don't have to live there? I don't have to live in a perpetual state of stress and worry. Matthew chapter 6, can I encourage you to go there as often as you have to and be reminded of what Jesus said about what to do when you're feeling stressed or worried. He said, go outside and take a walk and look at what God does for birds. Look at what God does for the flowers of the field. And then understand that Jesus said, are you his child, not more important than they? And you are. And how God is going to deliver you and help you. So again, no, I'm not saying that you're not going to feel stress and worry. It's human nature. But my friends, you do not have to live there. A reaction is not a way of life. If I find myself stressing out, fretting, and worrying, then my friends, you need to learn how to rebuke yourself and remind yourself of what God has promised. 1 Corinthians 11:31 is a great verse. It says, if we would judge ourselves, then we would not have to be judged. What do you think that means? I think it means just that I need to learn how to rebuke my mind. Why? Because it's not thinking biblically. I need to judge my own thought processes. I need to judge my own interpretation of events. If we would judge ourselves, then there's no need to be judged. And that means, again, like I just said, that I not only need to rebuke myself, but then remind myself, this is what God has said. So again, Peter is teaching us how to endure the moment. So I stand on the promise, I rest in the promiser, and then I live obediently. How many of us are glad that you and I do not have to live according to our emotions? At least I hope you know that. I mean, if you're up when life is up and down when life is down, my friends, you're going to be on a wicked roller coaster the course of your lifetime. Now, here's something else I have said to people. I have said that if you'll make yourself be obedient, if you'll make yourself behave, feelings will catch up. So we need to live in obedience. What did the angel say to Peter when the angel showed up? He said, arise. If it would have been you or me, we would have objected somebody saying that to us, and we would have rattled our chains. We would have said, I can't get up because I'm chained. But what does God say? My friends, can I tell you that it is the greatest example of faith that other people can then witness when you and I are making ourselves rise. I mean, life has thrown us down. Life has kicked us. And we're still in the middle of it. And we are making ourselves rise. We're making ourselves live in obedience. We don't feel it. It's not being driven by emotions. No, it is in defiance of how we're feeling. And we are making ourselves, making our flesh live in obedience. Here is something I heard and I have said, that people will witness victory and they'll hear God's message when a saint suffers successfully. And can I tell you that sometimes God will allow a season to arise in our life because he wants to put you on display before others. And so can I encourage you that you make yourself rise. Don't give in to your feelings. Don't give in to your emotions. Don't give in to your depression. Rise. Go to church. Open the songbook. Sing. And you're saying, but preacher, I don't feel like it. Then you make yourself do it. Live in obedience. What if I choose not to? Well, then you're failing to learn this lesson that we're finding Peter trying to teach us. And you're going to find it very difficult to be able to enjoy the peace that ought to be ours as God's children. And then the next thing I notice in the story is that you and I need to do what is in our power to do. While we're waiting on a miracle, you and I know that there are things that we need God to do. Why? Because God's the only one that can do it. But do we know that even in those kind of moments, there are things you can do to better your situation, and they're very much within your power to do them. And so you need to learn how to do that. Did you notice what the angel said in verse 8? The angel of the Lord took care of the chains. The angel of the Lord took care of the bars and the gates. But notice the angel of the Lord did not dress Peter. Peter had to dress himself, and the angel even specifically said, put on your own shoes. If my need, if the challenge that I'm facing is financial, well, then what's within my power? Well, I'm going to go out and find a job. I'm going to start earning some income. And I'm also going to give as God teaches me to do so. Why? Because, again, that's what faith looks like. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago, that I have a series of sermons through 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, and they are chapters that teach us about New Testament giving. And whenever God tells me to, I want to go through these chapters, and we'll study them together. But listen to 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 to 8. But this I say, he which sows sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which sows bountifully shall reap bountifully. Every man according as he purposes in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now there's a couple of things here that you and I need to see. And that is the miracle that we're actually waiting for is a time of reaping. And if you want to reap bountifully, which we all do, then you need to give bountifully. You need to find ways to give, even though your emotions don't cooperate. You need to find ways to give, not just give of your finances, but give of yourself and give of your time. And it said there in verse 7, that you and I need to purpose in our heart that this is something we're going to do. This is how we're going to respond to the moment that we're in. If you let your emotions dictate, if you let your feelings rule, then you're not going to live in obedience. And you need to do what is within your power to do, to hasten what it is you're waiting on God to do. And then the next thing I notice of what Peter did that helped him in the moment is we need to resist the temptation to spiritualize everything. And we heard in the story what Peter said about his interpretation. It says in verse 9, and he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but just thought he saw a vision. Do we not try to do that a lot? We try to spiritualize what God says we ought to expect, rather than believe that some of the things God says are to be concrete, things he will literally and physically do in us and for us and through us. But because we are struggling to believe, we'll send some of those very things that God has said into this land of endless, invisible believing. That it is spiritualized. It's not ever anything that is going to become something I see or something I experience. It's not ever going to become a part of my life. And my friends, if you do that with many of the things God said, then my friends, you're going to throw all of these great words from God into this land of endless, invisible believing. Friends, there are some things that you need to throw out there in the future and know that God is going to literally perform it. How many of us have read some of God's promises, and since we don't want to be accused of being without faith, we'll spout our faith, but deep inside we don't ever expect God to actually do it. We don't ever expect to literally be holding that in our hands, and we don't ever expect it to be real and concrete. And friends, I'm not talking about going to heaven. I'm talking about things God has said, about things he wants to do in you, for you, and through you in the here and now, in the life that you're living right now. The best thing we can do is have a stubborn faith. Have a faith that never says die. Have an unyielding faith despite setbacks, despite disappointments, despite odds, despite the challenges, to believe something when everybody else says it's a hopeless cause. But you and I are going to say, no, I believe God. And then finally, what did Peter do? Well, he went to church. Now, I know you're going to accuse me of doing what preachers often do. You're going to say, man, preacher, you're just always looking for a reason to get people to actually come to the physical church building. I didn't see anything here about him showing up at the church. Well, he did go to where everybody was praying. It's not worshiping God when chains fall off and gates open and the angel is gone and Peter is standing in the middle of the street and he's trying to figure out his next move. I promise you, God will show up. If you belong to him, if you have the blood of Jesus on you and you are one of God's kids, God will show up. And is it not sad that for many of God's kids, rather than us going to a physical church building on God's day and worshiping, we'll just gobble up his deliverance selfishly and stay in bed? So what did Peter do? What is Peter trying to teach us? When the gates opened and Peter found himself in the middle of the street and he's trying to figure out, what do I do now? Number one, he said, I'm going where God's people are gathered. And can I say, you can't go wrong staying faithful to the church. So God bless you. I hope this is helping. Bye.